Some people are like me and are actively looking for a brand new job in 2024. Or you have a job and you're looking for a slightly better job. But even if you have a job in this job market, you shouldn't feel too comfortable, too safe, too relaxed. And that's really quite unfortunate because it might not be up to you if you separate from your company. Because just randomly, on a random Tuesday, you can get the announcement that your company is going through a round of layoffs. Now, we talk about this all the time, almost every day, that you should look for the writing on the wall. If your organization has already laid off people in another department, or if within the past couple of years, your organization has laid off maybe a small percentage, that certainly doesn't mean that the layoff wave is behind you. Unfortunately, time after time, that just means that there's going to be another round of layoffs. So it's really hard to just feel very comfortable with your current job, especially if you're in an industry like tech. So it's no surprise, as we've talked about before, that there's this great anxiety and fear and worry around people with jobs, with good jobs, even jobs that they like, being afraid that they could be wrapped up in the next wave of layoffs. And now we have some new data that really does point to how afraid the average American is of being fired from their job. And really, with all the news and all the companies going through massive rounds of layoffs and people getting let go at no fault of their own, it's really no surprise that the fear of losing one's job is higher for the average American than it has been in the past decade. I have two different articles that go over this study and give us some more information to talk about. So let's dive in. Our first article is from Yahoo Finance, and the headline is, "Americans think they'll be out of work and are looking for jobs at the highest rate in 10 years, New York Fed survey." And as always, all of my articles are listed down in the description below, so you can read the whole thing. I'm just going to talk about the highlights and things that pertain to our conversation for today. The article goes on to say, more Americans are looking for jobs and unemployment worries are at their highest level in a decade, according to a new survey released by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York on Monday. And this article was published on August 20th, so very, very new, very recent. According to the New York Fed, the average expected likelihood of becoming unemployed in the next 4 months reached 4.4% in July, the highest in the survey's 10-year history. This compared to 3.9% a year ago. So this survey isn't 30, 40, 50 years old. It's only 10 years. But think about all the things we've been through in just the past 10 years. So it's not going to cover people's fears and concerns during the great financial crisis of 2008. It's not going to cover people's fears and concerns during the dot-com crash, but it will cover people's fears and concerns through the last pandemic that we had. So it does compare recently to 2020, 2021, where people weren't sure what was going on. They had worries and concerns about their family members, where they could travel to, could they go to work, is it safe, could they hang out with friends and family? There was all kinds of worry and concern about your job, about continuing to live, right? So that is quite telling that maybe it's not for 20 or 30 years, but it still covers during the pandemic time. We have to imagine with everything going on in the world, there had to still be high concerns about one losing their job. The expected likelihood of moving to a new employer also increased, rising to 11.6% last month from the 10.6% seen in July 2023, which tells us that even if people aren't concerned about losing their job and not being able to get a new one, the percentage of people who think that they're going to have to leave their current employer for one reason or another is still going up, even if they do have a high level of confidence that they can move on to a new organization. More respondents are also actively on the job hunt, with 28.4% saying they've been searching for a new job over the past 4 weeks, the highest level since March 2014 and an increase from 19.4% in July 2023. So with all these different data points, we see how the average American worker is feeling. They're worried about losing their job and not being able to get a new one. They're worried about something happening with their company, or maybe their company starting to go under. They see the water entering the ship, if you will, and they're going to eventually have to look for a new organization to work at. And then they're also just actively hunting for a new job, which shows us that people just do not feel safe in their current job. I mean, the most optimistic you seem to be able to be is that, hey, I'm going to get a brand new job at a new organization, but not everyone is even that optimistic. The article goes on to say the survey, which also noted decreased satisfaction with wage compensation, non-wage benefits, and promotion opportunities at respondents' current jobs, comes as the Federal Reserve weighs recent labor market weakness, with the unemployment rate now at 4.3%. Investors will also be closely watching expected annual revisions from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which could knock up 1 million jobs off previously reported job growth over the last year. So we've not been hearing a lot over the past few months, past year, about people just loving their jobs or loving some aspect of their job. Maybe there is just one aspect, but that's about it. Most people are not happy with the wages that they receive. And maybe if they have decent wages, that comes at the expense of some great benefits like healthcare, insurance, other kind of perks that you would have with a job 5 years ago. Or maybe people are just getting a job for the benefits. Maybe they have a government job, they don't love it, but they feel more secure in having a government job. They feel like it's less likely for them to be laid off. Maybe they have great insurance because they have a family to support, but the wage is barely enough to make ends meet. So we're not seeing a full, comprehensive 365-degree level of satisfaction in the work compensation package that people are receiving. And then on top of that, the government numbers have been lying to us. We talk about this all the time. Even just saying the unemployment rate is deceiving because it doesn't count people who are underemployed, working multiple jobs, are getting paid under what they're worth. And really, it doesn't cover people who don't have the same level of benefits that they used to have. So maybe the pay is about the same, but maybe their health insurance provider changes something that really doesn't meet all the needs that they have for their family, all the medical or health needs that they have for their family. And now, recently, we saw the adjustment of the jobs over the last year come out to, I don't have an article in front of me, but I believe it was 818,000 jobs that they said that they created over the last year that really didn't exist. So for the past couple of months on this channel, we've been talking about ghost jobs, about jobs that are posted that don't actually represent real jobs. And now we're finally starting to see a little bit of the data. We're starting to see that you and I are not completely crazy. We are not being victims of gaslighting. We are not accepting these numbers out there that everything is fine, the job market's fine, and everything is good. You're just complaining, you're just whining. No, that's not what's happening. It's true. And I don't even believe that number, but for the government to come out with even that number, to admit that they were off the mark, they overshot the jobs created by 818,000 is insane. Now, I believe that number is probably higher, but even to come out with a number that high is just mind-boggling. So I thought everything was fine. I thought everything is okay. This is the greatest economy that we've been in. Nobody seems to care about the average American's jobs because they're like, oh, well, the unemployment numbers are low. Let's talk about other issues, other things going on in the country. Yes, inflation could be high. It is high in a lot of places. But our salaries are what's really taking a nosedive. And that is something that somebody somewhere needs to do something to help us out, because we cannot make ends meet at these low salaries. We cannot make ends meet if we can't get a new high-paying job. But if we're constantly being lied to about all the amazing jobs being created, well then why would someone fix a problem that they don't admit exists? The article goes on to say, economists and strategists have warned any further deterioration of the labor market would likely have a negative spillover effect to markets and beyond. The problem is that we continue to see the weakness in the labor market, and we think that that's going to ultimately be what drives the market lower. We know that the US consumer is doing okay, but the US consumer is doing okay because they still have a job. The second that the employment market flips from one of surplus to one of deficit, which is something that we think we're rapidly nearing, we think the US consumer, unfortunately, will falter. And that's part of the problem. Every analyst, every big brain guru out there will tell you that everything is fine. The US consumer is doing fine. Everyone has jobs, but that's just not true. Even if you do have a job, you don't like your job, right? Or even if you do like your job, you're not getting paid. Or even if you are getting paid, your benefits are not there. Like, there is no complete, total satisfaction with jobs anymore. You're lucky if you have one aspect that you really like. Overall, you can't say that the consumer is doing okay and that the job market is doing okay when report after report of updates, things that happen afterwards that no one wants to talk about, comes out and says that, no, we've been lied to, the numbers were wrong. The article goes on to say, consumer prices have continued to ease closer to the Fed's 2% inflation target. Positive retail sales data for the month of July showed the consumer is still spending. Consumer confidence is rebounding, and recent filings for initial unemployment benefits have fallen more than expected. Yeah, I mean, that's really nice headline reading, but the reality is we talked about all of these numbers before. The price of things are up so high. I mean, you can call it inflation. I like to call it corporate greed. You might disagree with me, but things are too expensive. I feel like everyone should be able to agree upon that. And then as far as consumer spending, I mean, what are they spending on? They're spending on groceries, they're spending on eating, and I guess they're spending way too high on car payments. But what are you gonna do when every new car is ridiculously expensive? I don't believe you should go out and have a $700 to $1,000 car payment, but at the end of the day, you do need some kind of vehicle, right? You can't survive in most parts of America without a car. So it's not like people are going out and buying yachts, going partying. They're just trying to feed themselves, their families, and get to a job if they're fortunate enough to still have one. We're coming off unusual lows in the unemployment rate, following a very unusual time during the pandemic. A lot of the rules that some of these so-called forward-looking investors use aren't really going to work this time because the economy is in a very different place. Given those indications, which signal the US economy could be entering a Goldilocks scenario where growth expands while inflation retreats, traders are looking ahead to Jackson Hole for clues of what could come next. I think the Fed will have to certainly move in terms of the commentary. So I think it will be, one, acknowledging inflation has slowed, perhaps a little more quickly than they have been thinking, and that the jobs market may be slowing a little more rapidly than they have been believing be the most likely case. Markets are currently pricing in a nearly 100% chance that Federal Reserve cuts interest rates by the end of its September meeting. The odds of a 25 to 50 basis point rate cut are now split roughly 70-30 and after 50-50 odds placed last week. Our second article is from CNN. And even though it's on the same topic, I just want to talk about the things that differ in this article than our last one. The headline is, more and more Americans are worried they will lose their job. And this is from August 19th, so also very recent. The shape of the US labor market is changing. Job growth is slowing, and new survey data released Monday shows that Americans are starting to feel increasingly unsettled about it. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York's latest survey of consumers' labor market experiences and expectations showed that job, wage, and benefit satisfaction all shrank in July. Jitters aside, the July survey also showed that Americans also felt opportunities still abound. Job offer activity held steady from July 2023, and the average expected likelihood of receiving at least one job offer increased from last year. Additionally, the average reservation wage, the lowest wage one would accept for a new job, remained well above July 2023 and significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels. So according to that data point, people still are getting job offers, and the amount that they're asking for is not any lower than it was last year. Now, we don't know if people in 2023 were asking for a fair wage or not. We don't know if people in 2023 were also still as desperate and needy for a new occupation. We really don't know much about that consumer. And as far as job offers, yeah, I think people are getting job offers, but they're lower than they should be. So maybe let's compare it to 2020, 2021, where people could get good job offers. Everyone's salary was very fair, especially in industries like tech. Let's compare that to today, because I can't imagine that people are still getting the same quantity of offers as they were back then. And I can't imagine that people are still getting the same numbers, costs, benefits, all that kind of compensation package as they were a few years ago. They say the average reservation wage in July was $81,147, a slight decline from the series high of $81,822 set in March of this year, according to the survey, which is conducted every 4 months. The average reservation wage has increased 31.4% since March 2020. However, most of that gain can be attributed to inflation, New York Fed researchers wrote Monday in an accompanying blog post. Taking inflation out of the equation, that increase was a far tamer 8.2% for the same time period. And while the average reservation wage, in real terms, has essentially been flat since 2021, its trajectory is faring better than the 4 years before the pandemic when it was declining, New York Fed researchers found. So I don't know the industries that people are in, but I think if your average salary is $80,000, if it were to be tech, that would be very low. Average salary for a project manager is well into the 6 figures, and I'm sure it's the same thing for, different solutions architects, dev leads, a lot of different roles where the lowest that you'd get paid and lowest that you accept in 2020, 2021 would be way more than 81,000. I mean, I don't know what kind of industries everybody is in. The article goes on to say, job growth has slowed, especially in recent months, as the U.S. labor market has settled back into a more balanced state amid a slower growing economic backdrop. However, in July, the monthly job total was far lower than expected at just 114,000. The unemployment rate shot higher to 4.3%. While that data sent markets tumbling in response, economists cautioned that their surprising report does not necessarily indicate a forthcoming recession or an outright deterioration in the labor market. They noted that layoffs remain muted. The next job report is due out on September 6th, however. Data revisions due out Wednesday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics could help shed some light on whether job growth over the past year has been slower than initially reported. And we already talked about, I believe that number came out to be around 818,000 jobs, revision downward from what they've reported on. So that is certainly not a step in the right direction. So there you have it. Job loss fear is the highest that it's been in a decade. The more and more time goes on, the less and less crazier you and I look, because we're getting all kinds of new numbers that go against everything we've been told for the past couple of years. We're seeing the number of jobs created adjusted downwards. We're seeing new surveys of people being more afraid of losing their job than they have been in the past 10 years. We're seeing all these crazy layoffs that maybe they didn't talk about a couple of years ago, but now they're just too out of control to ignore. I'll be here to constantly give you updates, to talk about what's going on in the job market, because I think it's important that all of us know and all of us are on the same page about the reality and the truth of what's going on in 2024. Talk to you later.